So yeah, hopefully everybody is now able to get in. Great to see you, Michael, for joining. It's great. Thanks everybody. A little slow getting started here this afternoon. Link didn't seem to be working, but we'll get it going here, and we've got an audience pouring in, and excited to have this conversation. Maybe like a little old home week for Jamie and I, and decided to talk about data. And as the Synatic slogan goes, getting the right data to the right people at the right time. So this has been really great opportunity to introduce ourselves, talk a little bit about Synatic, even a little bit about ACT, and how cool it is that we're partnered together again. But for those out there that I have not had a chance to meet or we haven't crossed paths, my name's Chris Cline, and I am relatively recently new to ACT, which is the Agency Council for Technology and part of the National Big I, the IIABA, and spent nearly 30 years on the carrier side and really just fell in love with the industry, being involved in many, many things that are going on out there designed to help independent agencies and independent agency channel thrive and be successful in an ever-changing world, and at least in the ACT space through the lens of technology. So it's really cool to be here, and really enjoyable to be back online with Jamie. As you'll find out, we've got a bit of a rapport and a podcast together. If Facebook memories tell me anything, Jamie, it was almost exactly a year ago, like within a few days. So
yeah, it was
excited to be back together again. But why don't you give everybody a little bit of background on you, and we'll just get this thing rolling.
Yeah. So Jamie Piers, VP of Sales and Alliances, or Biz Dev and Alliances over at Synatic. So we are a data automation and integration tool. First met Chris way back when he was in the dark days of carriers, and seen the light now, man. But we did that podcast a while back ago and just struck up a good rapport. So interested in having just a bit of a riff today, and good word to use today. Riff. Got a guitar in the background. Good little ovation set I see happening on there. So yeah, just looking forward to talking about a couple of things. Data, talking about what ACT's doing. I think ACT's a very exciting and rejuvenating initiative that Chris has joined now, and it's exciting to see that the independent agents can get a renewed focus through Chris's rejuvenation of ACT. And not to say that the previous leadership wasn't doing a great job there. I think just new ideas, new people can rejig things and start driving strategies there. And we're certainly looking forward to working closely with Chris on, and everyone in the industry really, around how we can make data more accessible for the broader agency network, and how do we make it commonplace that this is an attainable thing for people to get to, as opposed to something that is a bit of a pipe dream. But that's really what we focus on: data automation, integration. That's our play.
I appreciate the setup and obviously the kind words. We'll kind of occasionally maybe do a group hug throughout. But I mean, in all sincerity, and the whole notion around data, and it was very intriguing when we met a year ago, and the really the articles, the thought leadership that your organization was bringing, and talking about data through a lot of different perspectives, the customer experience and customer journey, and how that brings business value not only to organizations but their customers. It was really powerful. And so, when I made this move and we connected, I understand you guys had some dialogue before, and we talked about partnership with Synatic and ACT, and how we could continue to carry the dialogue forward, hopefully trying to bring value to independent agencies that are out there trying to do new things. And when thinking about this, one of the topics that is in everywhere we go, every place we seem to land in the industry, whether it's webinars like these or some of the in-person events that are now happening again, thank goodness. The conversation is about data, and it's really been about data for a very long time, but it's so much more energized, I guess, now, and maybe more complex, depending on per point of view or experiences folks have had. and the proliferation of connectivity and the assembly of and availability of third-party data, and maybe even the ability to create new data from all of that has given new spark to the industry and the
Yeah.
capabilities. But it isn't necessarily organic to everybody, and it seems to have a stigma that it really is for the big organizations, or maybe that this
Mm.
is a carrier only play. And what I think is really cool about what you're doing is trying to simplify the explanation, simplify the why, and create tools and resources to help people really take hold of the data that's at their disposal and do different things with it. So, I, you know, I don't want to presume anybody's starting point in this conversation. And so, for those of you that are more sophisticated or have more experience in the data world, maybe kind of humorous for a second. But Jamie, if you would, let's talk about why data is so increasingly important and the value it brings to the industry, and maybe some of the struggles that the industry has today, kind of getting their arms around it and doing stuff with it.
Yeah. So I think a lot of that stems from the sort of the fast food society we've headed into now, where everything's so tangibly accessible. You've got your mobile phone, you've got internet, you can get to stuff straight away. So people have, generally speaking, got into this mentality of if I want something, I should be able to get it now. I shouldn't have to wait an inordinate amount of time. And unfortunately, thanks to services like Amazon and those kind of services that are really quick turnaround items, the concept of a long time in services is actually drastically reduced. So a long time is, a day can sometimes be a long time, whereas a decade ago, maybe 2 weeks was a long time for the same respective service. So I think the industry is under this pressure to keep pace with the times, and there's I think, generally speaking, a fairly broad recognition of the fact that the industry is a little bit behind with data, and we're playing catch up now, right? So us being in the insurance sector, like, we're finding that FOCO are waking up to the fact that they need to look after their customer journey, like customer experience, their CX. Like, what does CX look like? How does a customer progress through that process of, first engagement to signing a piece of paper to continued happiness and retention? And broadly speaking, businesses are waking up to that as well. So there definitely is a pressure on the industry to keep pace with the times. How do we keep modern? Naturally, we've had this whole big swing in the industry to large insurtechs who have made it easy to get access to insurance right there and then, get your quote right there and then, done, signed up. 20 minutes later, we're insured. It's over. We don't have to talk to anyone. That's, in many ways, put like the fear of God into into insurance agents and brokers. And I think there's a swing back away from that to the where it should be, which is a little bit more central around that, where, yes, you're going to get the extreme cases, but a whole bunch of humans want to deal with humans. People like people, and especially through COVID, people like interacting with people. Like, people have missed going to in-person meetings and engaging with humans. So there's this recognition of, well, actually, there's still a lot of place for brokers and agents in the industry. It's not all going to go online, and it's not just going to be ordering widgets online. You're going to need to interact. So how does an agency move into this day and age where we need to look after our customer experience, look after how we guide our customer through a process, and ensure that we've got oversight of what is happening through that process? And that fundamentally, I think, is driving the industry to a point of recognition of, we need to modernize, and we need to get with the times, to use an overused phrase.
There's a lot inside that for sure. And one of the
Yeah.
things you mentioned, that people still want to do business with people, but data and really technology at a larger level just really brings a great deal of more of an enablement concept
Yeah,
to that
100%.
experience than I think sometimes we might get persuaded into thinking about. There's clearly some firms out there that um, I don't know if devaluing the human element in the transaction is the right word or not, but certainly trying to automate things where the human offers maybe less overall value. But you know, inside all of that, one of the things that has really hit me, and in my prior world, we referenced the carrier days. A couple of CEOs ago, really would have been during the 0809 U.S. economic scenario, and
Yeah.
things were kind of scrambling around, and he gave a rallying cry to the employee base that I thought was somewhat impactful. And but it was this notion that there's a flight to quality, and so there's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now. And the Big I just released their market share report, and so I think that's kind of an 8-year run rate, and the independent agency market share actually climbed in the last year, which might make it an 8-year high. And there are actually more independent agencies in the economy now than there were over the last several years. And so that is through the influx of all this VC money trying to drive insure tech, which, I think we would all say it's maybe out of the gate was a little aggressive on disintermediating agencies and even insurers.
Yes.
And that's largely, kind of settled a little bit, but also through a global pandemic. So there's this flight to quality thing, and people want advice, and they want to make sure that the things they own and the risks that they have in their life are as protected as possible. So that might be a little bit of a Pollyanna way to kind of circle back around through this. Human element is likely not going away anytime soon. However, to your point, Jamie, what I love about this notion of the customer experience, and we could probably argue the agency experience too, um,
Mm.
is that it can be significantly improved for the humans interacting with each other at the right time, with sophistication of technology, but also that of data.
Yeah. And I think that the other thing that is really driving hard in the industry at the moment is just retention of talent. I mean, that's a huge thing right now. So you look at this, and like we'll get to how we modernize and the sort of the process we go through and what we do, and talk around that. This isn't a sales pitch. This is all about like learnings. How do you go on this journey? But so it's interesting. I use this word internally a lot with a huge amount of tongue in cheek, but we talk about making our website sexy, so that it can, like, people will want to go to it, or we talk about making marketing sexy so that people will want to look at it. But I'll use that same term, like we need to make the industry sexy again. Like we were sitting in a pitch the other day where it was like I got out the other end of the pitch, and I've never sat so clearly on the other side of a meeting and said, like, if somebody made me go and do that gentleman's job every single day, I would quit the next day. Like, for fact, no two ways about it. Like, he was literally just reconciling, forgive the turn of phrase, but crap data. That was a big chunk of his day job. And I just looked at that and I went, like, how can we work with the industry to make that fixed so that it's cool to work there again? Because there ain't nobody who's new to the industry who gonna go and say, sweet, I'm gonna go and do that job, because it's a crap job. It's just drudge work. And you look at this contention of um, rising salary costs, inflation, and then we've got increased admin efforts to keep our systems maintained. It's just like people walking into that scenario see like red flags. So why wouldn't they go and move towards somebody or an industry that's got that, relatively speaking, sorted? So it's sort of a melting pot at the moment in the industry of many factors that's making it challenging for the industry to kind of keep up with the times, because if you don't have the people coming in to assist to make things more operationally efficient, and you can't find those people to bring them in, then how are you ever going to solve that? So it's sort of this secular event that just feeds on itself. So really, where we're focusing at the moment and where we want to kind of sell the story around data is just to fix up the stuff that's super unsexy at the moment, and make data sexy again is sort of ish what we're aiming at.
Sounds like you need a new, Zoom screen or a team screen
Yeah,
backstop.
make
That's what
data
Synatic's
sexy
doing.
again.
But there's something to that, a lot to that, really. And we talked. I know even our organizations have talked around how um, attracting talent, building culture, how infinitely connected they are to evolving technology and utilization of data, and trying to create just cooler jobs and cooler experiences, and the ability to kind of influence a community and to take care of our clients. But one of the things that I was curious about is that the cyclical nature of a lot of these things, or this concept of a polarity, that there's not so much a kind of an and scenario. There's a lot, or not an or, that things have to coexist. And so while these tools, and I think we can kind of maybe make this segue, is the tools that are out there now that allow um, better utilization of data that resides in multiple, and in many cases truly disparate locations, that might not have, or likely doesn't have, a great deal of cleanliness attached to it. The tools that are allowing that, enabling that for the end user to do more things and make better decisions and be more insightful about how they plan their customer experience, on the other hand, is also helping carriers, and more so the actuaries and the pricing analysts and product developers create even more and more sophisticated and more specificity around how they price and underwrite risk, which then turns around and creates greater need for more complex data coming in on the other side. And so the power of data is sort of infinitely strong across these things.
Yeah.
But as we solve for the utilization of what we already have, there are people that are using the data they get to do even cooler and cooler things, which then makes the data we need some way or another, even if that's coming from behind the scenes via some sort of an AI or third party. One way or another, it's sort of been the way of the world. As soon as we figure out how to maximize what we have, um, things get more complex, and we need more natural resource. And in that case, that's the data.
Yeah. And I think we need to a large degree, data has, and you alluded to it, exactly the problem earlier, or the challenge earlier, is like data has been seen as this realm of carriers, because the carriers sit on all the data. And it's like, no, man, you can sit on that data now, and you've got stuff that you can do cool things with. Now, what are those things that we can do? Like, it's as we start piecing together these puzzles. So I'll talk about like real examples that we've done. So, I mean, we take out things like um, data from an AMS 360, and we do this with Applied Epic as well. We pull the data out and we get policy schedule details. Now we take those policy schedule details and we get an address. So obviously talking about CRE, real estate insurance here. So we get an address and we go and pop that into the Hazard Hub API. If you don't know what Hazard Hub is, it's a really cool solution which gives you a indication of how much risk a property holds. So things like, is it on a floodplain? Are there tornadoes passing through it perennially? Is there a fire hydrant close to it? And what we've done is we've taken that schedule data, and we've taken the data from Hazard Hub, and we've overlaid it and given you a property risk portfolio of what you as the insurer are carrying. Now, that may seem like a carrier's responsibility traditionally, but what we've got to remember as well is when we want to go and say to, like, let's say, for instance, we want to take that from one carrier from carrier A to carrier B. Now, if we go to carrier B and we say, we've got this book of business and we want to get you to reprice this book of business so that we can see whether we can move the whole book across, and we've got this data in there ready to make your life easier, A, you're going to get a response quicker from the carrier. B, the carrier is more likely to say, sweet, these guys have got their stuff together. We're doing things like overlaying. So this example is in property as well. What we're doing is we're just getting and it sounds super simple, and it actually is, but it's just because we know where the API is heading. So we go and get property data around market valuation. So there's a thing in property valuations called AVM, which is automated valuation model. And that is then an algorithm that runs on the property, pulls data back, and overlays it with your AMS 360 or Hawksoft or Nexure or whatever it may be data. And now we can get an indicator of which policies have I got misaligned between market value and insured value, because that's there. You're right in the crosshairs for an E&O lawsuit if you don't update that. And we all know what property prices have done in the last, I mean, call it what, 1-2 years, especially. Like there's been a proper exponential lift there. So if you haven't gone and checked that as the agent, you're actually exposed to E&O. So all of a sudden it's now there's actual real tangible things that are making impact on my business and automating what I traditionally would have had to have done manually. And that's really where we get to the heart of what a data warehouse is how do we get to the point of saying, well, there's not just my insular little AMS data set sitting here. How do I go and say, well, there's a whole broad range of data out there that I'm actually interacting with, even if it's via these 10 little guys, via people filling things in. Somehow somebody somewhere along that value chain is actually going and getting information, understanding it, and making a decision off of it. And that, like, you can talk APIs and NoSQL data and SQL data and ODBC and SOAP and REST and GraphQL, and you can throw every single freaking 4-letter acronym, 3-letter acronym, 2-letter acronym, everything that Microsoft will try and sell you and all those good things. But the reality is that that's the picture you want to get as an agent and be able to move dynamically with the requirements in your business is, oh, I'm branching into whatever it may be. Marine insurance. How do I get bits of data around marine insurance and then go and say, I've got something to report on here and to work with and make business decisions?
Gosh, yeah, tons there. I've become a Lex Friedman fan too, so we're like, let's hover on this statement for a little bit, or let's do the double click thing or whatever.
Let's double click on this one.
um, quick shout out to Lex Friedman if you're out there not listening to his podcast. But my thoughts there. So you've talked about some examples of taking AMS data, which is very, very common to anybody listening today. The vast majority of agencies are running some version of that. And then thinking about at least the examples you gave, kind of a single data set or a single supplementary action to bring value at book transfer, or to kind of go do a book true up market versus replacement cost value. When you think about a long-term repeatable process and things that can create sustainability, I'm curious, like maybe some of the examples that come to mind there. But maybe as part of that question, when you reference data warehouse, I mean, can you just pause there for a second and give our viewers a bit of what that actually means? Because that might mean something different to everybody based on whatever they have or have not been exposed to. So in the context of this conversation for a typical independent agency, what are you thinking about?
Yeah, so there's two typical journeys with data. Is we've got the aggregate and integrate journey. So the aggregate is pulling a bunch of disparate, so different, located in different places, and pulling data together so that the bit of data we need here is associated to the bit of data we need here. And ultimately, it's almost always so that we can run a report on it and see what's happening with that data. So a data warehouse is, it's as if you were manufacturing a vehicle. You would pull pieces of your vehicle or parts of your vehicle from multiple suppliers, bring it into a warehouse. You'd have a manufacturing, methodology within that warehouse, build the car, and then at the end you shove the car out. So to use that analogy and overlay it back to data, your multiple parts are your different systems that you have. So your engine is your AMS 360 or your Epic or your whatever it may be, and that is because that really is the engine that does the grunt work. And then let's say the beautiful facade, the body, the shell of the car is your CRM, because that kind of ties into the analogy. So you're bringing those bits in from multiple places, you're assembling it inside, and then at the end you've got a built product, and your built product is being able to see your book of business and shovel that out in whichever way you want to. So you want to see that by line of business, got you. You want to see it by the different legal entities, and that fundamentally is a data warehouse. And the challenge in the data warehouse is that it's a dynamic thing. It's never, it's a continuous journey, continuous improvement. It's, you never get to a destination of like, ta-da, it's finished. You will always keep on growing and going and changing bits of your business and changing a line of business, tweaking a line of business, finding new solutions. So you need to keep on bringing those parts in to keep on assembling that endpoint as you want to see it.
Yeah, I love that example. And I mean, of all the times in different roles I've had where I've been never inside this is sort of outside my swim lane of intellectual horsepower, Jamie. So no, I can't use all those four-letter acronyms because I don't know what any of them mean. And apparently I can
Hate
barely
them,
say
man.
acronym. But the analogy or the metaphor of the auto manufacturing warehouse, and so they bring in all the different parts that they might need for all of the individual cars they would bring, and of course they're cataloged and stored in a unique way. And then the processes say, if we're going to go build, whatever model of car, you don't need all the parts, you need a subset of parts. So the processes then
Yeah.
to go pull what you need for that car, and then when you do need parts for a different model, the processes support that. So there's, the visualization of that as a warehouse might be
Yeah.
very elementary and, kind of a duh moment for a lot of folks. But I think it's good to kind of clean that up because it does then empower you to do a lot of different, a lot of different things. And so these are grand um, examples that you shared. But I think going sort of into the day in the life of example, when you think about the power of data, the power of getting good at getting the data cleaned up, stored appropriately in some mechanism like a warehouse, by default, then that starts to bring front side discipline around data gathering and the cleanliness of the data that you bring in, whether that's via system or whether it's human beings entering data, which then just continues to add to that continuous cycle of learning and improvement that you mentioned.
Yeah.
But I think if there are folks out there listening today too, they would, especially those in the M&A space or the agency evaluation space, they would argue that an agency with good, clean data, tight processes around, I like this aggregating or integrating data, and that are doing something with it, bring a higher overall valuation even
Oh,
than
100%.
those who have a whole other set of
Yeah.
homework assignments that could come after an internal or an external sale.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So, I mean, there's two things that come out of there is one, wholeheartedly agree. Like, if you've got your own house sorted, like your ability to sell that house it's better. It just is. It always is. So, if your house is sorted, you can sell it. And people will pay above market price just because it looks prettier, and that's the reality of it. Like, also people will trust the figures more because they can see what you're doing. So they won't have to go like Spanish Inquisition onto like the freaking data and then go and like want to pull every single thing, because they can see your data. It's actually tangibly there and they can view it. I think what also changes is, and we've had I mean, we've won a couple of top 100 agencies now, and where what's fascinating is that some of the agencies have moved from a, when we acquire, we need to migrate to our package, and it's a valid strategy. So I don't want to knock the strategy. The strategy in and of its own right is a good strategy. I get it. There's consistency of input of data. There's consistency of output of data. The trick, though, is because they're acquiring at such a rate, it becomes a challenge to bring that data on, because you take one of the biggest acquirers, or the biggest, I think, in the market last year. They're acquiring like 15 a month. There's no ways you can do that, feasibly do that, without a team of like 500 people overseeing like that data take on cadence. Exaggeration with 500, but probably like 50 to 60 people. So what we do now is we say, well, if they're on Hawk, leave them on Hawk. Let them run happily on Hawk. You bought them because they're operating efficiently and they're doing cool stuff. Leave them be. Let them run. And all you do is you bring that data, not all, but limited level of difficulty, bring that data into the warehouse. You get your visibility and you can do stuff with that. So there's a huge amount of value in that data warehousing process for acquiring agencies, not just the acquired. So there's actually value both sides of the fence there.
Yeah, I like that example too, right? I mean, you think about the prolific nature that some of these firms are buying. You're right. I mean, even if it's 50 people, I mean, even if it's 20 people, even if you just roughly swag it, a couple $100,000 in revenue per head count. I mean, you think about the amount of premium,
It's
therefore revenue
huge.
you have to generate just to cover your data integration activities.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to me. But you were talking about there and getting your house in order, and if you can see what's working or what's not, it kind of led me to these are a little bit more kind of a quasi esoteric thing, but in today's world, and we'll leave all the politics and stuff for shows that focus on those things, but we can as humans be suspect of things we don't understand and can't see. So the greater clarity there is around what you have, the greater transparency into your book of business and into your operations and the caliber of data. Not only does that help you in an M&A world, internal succession world, but going back to where you started, Jamie, around talent acquisition, talent retention, and creating a good experience for your customers and your employees, transparency is a really powerful tool. And
Mm,
we still have some of this in the industry, but we're not too far away from being able to say long ago were the days when, but it was, I mean, I grew up in a world where agencies wouldn't talk about their compensation. They wouldn't talk about commission or contingencies and the
mm,
relationships they had with carriers. And now you see, and this is very sort of anecdotal, but I would say some of the higher growth rate firms are creating significant transparency efforts around growth and sales and how that influences the overall financial health of the organization. And therefore, how does that tie to the performance expectations and compensation that the staff can get? And that is only possible with good, clean data. I mean, if you're rewarding a group
yeah.
of account executives for cross-selling or upselling a coverage or close ratios or how many outbound calls they make or whatever it is, the data has to be trustable and it has to be clear and it has to be easy to get. And kind of meandering around there, which I can do, but I just think there's so many aspects of just running an independent agency. I'd be hard pressed to find any aspect of running a small business or independent agency that is not improved by spending time, effort, and energy on data.
Yeah. And I mean, those are such, like, your closure rates, your cross sells, your upsells, like those are so measurable through data. And what's even more than that, it's not just measuring what has happened, it's actually telling people like fish where the fish are. Like it's one of our favorite sayings at Synatic is when we're targeting on our outbound, we fish where the fish are. We want to go and say to, like if we know we have a solution for an Applied Epic customer and we've built a pre-canned solution that we can go and say, here's how you integrate to Relativity 6 with Applied Epic, boom. We want to go and hit them and say, like, this is how you do it. This is how you get your next codes updated in Applied Epic. Boom, it's done. It's pre-canned. So it's something you want to agency should be thinking about on the next step of I'm going to reward people for their cross sells and their upsells, but I'm also going to tell them where they can find their cross sells and upsells. And if your data is all over the place, you just fundamentally can't do that, and it's incredibly disheartening. Like agencies are ultimately sales organizations. They are created to take over the sales effort of the carriers because the carriers didn't want to run sales organizations anymore, I guess. But and there's way more reasons for it than that. And I'm being tongue in cheek there, but ultimately, if we're going to be a mechanized business to go and sell, then tell me to fish where the fish are. If I'm the salesperson, like if I'm facing the customer and I'm having a conversation with them and I know they have automobile insurance with me, and I also know that they have a boat, like I must know that so that I can go and say, hey, whilst you're on the phone, I can give you this deal on this, on this policy because you've got this with us already. I can take it to the same carrier, or I can go and try and remarket it and get a better rate for you. What do you think? Now, no one in their right mind is going to say no, thank you to a 10% discount on their insurance, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I think that's a good insight too. And the fish where the fish are, had jotted down something around like now we've been talking a little bit about sort of the static collection and some of the things we can reporting and maybe even some larger scale benefits, but the predictive nature of this. I mean, predictive analytics is another swim lane
Yeah.
here, but just applying now what you're able to learn via a viewable dashboard, KPI concept, where you can take these things and say, now here you can go do something differently with greater likelihood of desired output. And so you think about this go cross sell where you think you can win a cross sell. I mean, we all remember days where, this agencies would divide a book up by the alphabet, and when they would deploy a cross sell or an
Yeah.
upsell initiative across, it was each staff member call all of their customers and go do X. And now with this kind of thing, you can say, hey, look, we can learn not only which customers have the criteria that are likely to be upsold or maybe need to be upsold, from an E&O perspective, but you can also then start to look at the
Yeah.
talent in your organization and get people doing the right jobs, because some people are just more inclined to cross sell. Some are more inclined to really take care and nurture a client in a service role. And there's just different things you can learn across all of this stuff. And it sounds like, it could be daunting to tackle all of these things, but, any individual agency, if they get clear about how much you want to grow, how big you think you need to be, and the kind of customers you want to serve, and maybe the geography you're in, data brings so much value in helping enable those types of things and maybe even influence those kind of things. Because the
Yeah.
number of conversations you're in where you hear an agency say, hey, they have a niche or they specialize in A, B, or C, and then you ask how the data supports that notion, there's a lot more subjectivity at times in those answers than very clear data. And it might point out that they are rock stars at something they're not deploying enough capital on going after, for example.
Yeah. And there's so much benefit to getting that data together for your carrier negotiations as well. And I think that's where people underestimate the value of it. Like remarketing a book can be done, comparatively speaking, very rapidly to the way it's done at the moment, where it's very, very tiresome and or for a lot of organizations, at least I should say, it's very tiresome and very time consuming. So how can I say, well, I can see where 80% of my revenue is coming from? What is the 20%? Do I want to remarket it? Do I want to sell it off? What do I want to do with it? So now we're making real informed strategic decisions around what the data is telling us, and it's cold hard facts. So, and I think just to touch on a point you raised there is it's the daunting nature of it that prevents a lot of people from going down that journey. And the reality is that there are ways to achieve it without going to the nth degree. And I always talk about, like, it's actually ironically, it was the first podcast we were on together was FOGS, Fear of Getting Started. And we spoke a lot about You Should Know Me Better by Now and FOGS, Fear of Getting Started. Um, so it's you if you don't break the ice, you're going to continue to live in fear. And not fear is the wrong word, but trepidation is a better word. Like it's this like I don't know how to get there, man. And that's why it irks me so much. Like I freaking hate all those acronyms. Like they irk the crap out of me because it's like, dude, just be real. Like just tell me just tell me real stuff that I'll understand and put it into words that I'll understand because I'm talking from a customer's point of view because I'm the customer. Like if I don't understand, I ain't gonna buy it. So tell it to me in real words. So give me something tangible. Give me a book of business. Start me off with a book of business, and I'm good to go. And then at least I got something, and then there's a result at the end of it. And too often it gets mystified into like the dark art of data, and it doesn't need to be that because ultimately yes, there are complexities around insurance data, but it's not to get to basics. It is not it's not as heavy a lift as people are often think it will be.
That's a great way to maybe start thinking about tying a bow on this thing. But so I went to school as a graphic designer, and I'm aging myself here, but I was the first graduating class to learn type specking and cutting amber lith, which was really old school graphic design,
Yes.
and then also started on the Macintosh. And so there was this fear that like the Macintosh was going to kind of take the graphic designer out of a career. But what we've seen now, here we are, 20, 25 years later, is
Yeah.
a lot more people are capable of doing things graphically pleasing. But for the stuff that really needs graphic design, there's plenty of roles out there for graphic designers. And I think I can apply
100%.
that analogy to this, right? This isn't telling every agency principal that they have to become a data scientist. And this is never
Correct.
going to displace data science in the industry, but it is elevating. The tide really is raising all ships. The overall
Yeah.
utilization of data for the betterment of all consumers and all agencies is at our doorstep here. And so what I would love to do is, I mean, I know you said this isn't really a commercial, but like how would an agency get started? So there's been a lot of talk. We're telling people they need to think about it, and we're just one of hundreds of conversations on the internet talking about this. But if somebody says I'm in, I want to do something different, I want to get my arms around data tomorrow. Do you have sort of like a basic playbook, short of calling 1-800 Jamie Pierce, and getting the ring, just starting to do something different tomorrow?
Yeah, so what we've done is we've done a basic reports and packages out of things like AMS 360, EasyLink, Applied, Epic, Hawk, those kind of solutions. And I mean these are intended to be super basic reports that kind of kick you off in a direction and then you go and have a discussion around it. So, we've got like premium reports and then we've got commission reports on our book of business here and what's our distribution look like, so on and so forth. So like that is really brought data into an insurance data model and it's allowed us to go and report on that. Now the truth of it is that Synatic looks after both the aggregation and the integration process. So whether we want to go and take data and aggregate it for the purpose of reporting, or if we want to go and integrate data and move data between solutions, that's done through what we call a flow. And again, we've got a good chunk of experience there. So we've done things like AMS 360 to Salesforce, AMS 360 to Wonderwrite, AMS 360 to HubSpot. We've done Applied Epic to Relativity 6, and I can keep on listing them, but there's a whole bunch of spaces we've played in there. And all of that is done through a flow of data that looks a lot like a sort of a Visio diagram, if you know Visio, and each of these steps is doing something with the data. In this case, we're hitting Applied Epic's BDE, and we're storing the data in the data warehouse inside Synatic. So yes, definitely there's a playbook outside. We come with a set of standard reports and a set of standard practices, but what we're really interested in is what does get the right data to the right person at the right time mean to you right here, right now? What is your burning issue? And that's what we want to focus on. Too often times it's about like, yeah, but we can, providers will come tell you how they can integrate different insurtechs. And yes, that's important, but very often the orchestration of what the agency needs, not what somebody thinks the agency needs, what the agency itself needs, is what needs the focus. And what we do is we treat that agency as gold, and we do what the agency needs, because very often those tweaks and flows of different needs are going to be what makes that agency unique and is part of their DNA.
I love that. Well, first of all, the visualization here at the end is, kind of a great punctuation on the dialogue. I think people need to see that, and the fact that you're bringing this together in insurance terms and know our industry. And, I can, say this as a friend of yours. I know you care about the industry and what agencies to be successful. And that's a powerful thing. But, you said something there I think is really, really critical. And if you're an agency listening today, maybe finish on this note, but you start with an individual agency's goals in mind and an appreciation for where they are starting from, rather than trying to overlay a cookie cutter solution, which I think is the cause for a lot of frustration, a lot of aggravation, and Twitter banter, quite candidly, about what does or doesn't work, because nothing works the same for everybody.
Correct.
So you bring a lot of opportunity to take a standardized set of capabilities, but yet customize them to the individual needs. So that's really cool stuff.
That's the one.
Awesome.
Cool, man.
Yeah, well, I love shooting a breeze with you. Obviously, we could talk about anything and everything, and anybody that can identify an ovation over my shoulder from halfway around the globe is a friend of mine. And on all sincerity, appreciate the friendship and the partnership. Definitely appreciate your willingness to come join forces with ACT and a number of strategic thinking organizations who care about the health of the industry. And the fact that Max, who's probably watching from your team, will be joining us in Nashville for the ACT Tech Summit here in a few weeks as well. We're just really excited about the partnership and what you guys are doing in the industry.
Us too. Cool, man.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Chris. Chat soon, man.
Yep.
Ciao. Bye.